Colonel Elizabeth Liz Brooks walked into a small-town Texas supermarket on a peaceful weekend afternoon. Dressed in a casual white shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers, she blended in perfectly with the other shoppers. No one would have guessed this unassuming woman had spent her entire career defending the country, commanding hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. Liz cherished these quiet moments, picking up a few essentials after a long, stressful week. But that peace was about to be shattered by a seemingly insignificant act that revealed the true character of another person. At the end of the aisle, a tall man in a police uniform, Officer Paul Smith, accidentally knocked a packet of noodles and a bottle of soda off the shelf. Liz paused, watching as Paul glanced at the mess and then casually walked away, leaving it for someone else to clean up. As a soldier, Liz was trained to pay attention to detail and be accountable for her actions. Paul's careless behavior and indifferent attitude didn't sit well with her. Liz stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, officer," she said. "You just dropped a few things. Maybe you should pick them up so no one trips over them." Instead of apologizing, Paul turned, his gaze sweeping over Liz as if she wasn't worth his time. With a dismissive smirk, he replied, "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? I don't have time for such trivial matters." Taken aback by his arrogance, Liz remained composed. Her eyes, however, now held a serious glint. "As a police officer," she countered, "you have a responsibility to set an example for the community. Picking up after yourself isn't just polite, it shows respect for everyone here." Her words, however, seemed to fall on deaf ears. Instead of acknowledging his lapse in judgment, Paul became sarcastic, escalating the situation with more offensive remarks. The atmosphere in the supermarket shifted, the quiet hum of shopping replaced by a palpable tension. The crowd began to take notice, their curiosity piqued. Liz could feel their eyes on her, but she stood her ground, ready to defend her principles. Paul Smith looked Liz up and down, a sneer twisting his lips. He stood there, tall and self-satisfied, making no move to clean up the mess. Inside, Liz felt a surge of anger, but with the discipline of a seasoned officer, she kept her emotions in check. Years on the battlefield had taught her that calmness and decisiveness could diffuse even the most stressful situations. Taking a deep breath, she spoke, her voice calm but no less resolute. "Sir, this isn't a small matter. You're wearing a police uniform. Everyone here is watching you. Doing something as simple as picking up what you dropped isn't just a citizen's responsibility. It's part of representing your profession." Her words were a clear warning, but instead of heeding them, Paul scoffed, a laugh laced with mockery and arrogance. "Listen," he drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You seem to think you know a lot about the responsibilities of a policeman, but you don't know a thing. This isn't worth the trouble, and frankly, you should mind your own business." Liz could feel the stares of the onlookers, some of whom had started recording the scene with their phones. But she refused to be intimidated. She was angry, not only at Paul's irresponsibility, but also at the injustice she and so many others had endured. This insult wasn't just personal. It represented a larger pattern of social prejudice she had fought against throughout her career. Unflinching, her eyes now gleaming with determination, Liz looked directly at Paul. "You're judging the wrong person," she said, her voice soft but powerful. "You may not realize it, but your behavior will have consequences, not just for me, but for you too." Paul smirked, clearly not believing her words. But beneath Liz's calm exterior, anger and resolve were simmering. She knew this wasn't just a petty argument. It was a moment to stand up for herself and the values she held dear. Paul still stood there, a sarcastic smile plastered on his face, waiting for Liz to lose her cool. But instead of reacting with anger, she chose the measured approach of a seasoned commander. "I'm not here to argue," Liz said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I simply want to remind you that your actions affect others, and reflect who you are as a police officer. You should know your responsibilities better than anyone." Liz's pointed words made the surrounding crowd pay even closer attention. Some shoppers had stopped altogether, their attention riveted on the unfolding drama. Paul, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, suddenly found himself on the defensive. Seeing the eyes on him, Paul chose arrogance to mask his embarrassment. He laughed, the sound echoing in the small aisle. "Responsibility?" he scoffed. "Who are you to lecture me? Just some busybody woman, nothing more, nothing less. Don't think you have the right to stand there and tell me what to do. You don't understand anything about my job." Paul's sexist and racist rhetoric was a low blow, but instead of letting her emotions get the better of her, Liz took a deep breath, her eyes unwavering. She knew her actions in this moment would show the difference between her and Paul, a true leader versus an abuser of power. "I don't need you to understand who I am," Liz replied, her voice calm but weighty. "But I do need you to understand that everyone in this society deserves respect. And if you can't manage that, then you're the one who doesn't deserve the uniform you're wearing." Paul laughed louder, a sound of defiance and contempt. "What do you think you can do to me? I'm a cop. The law is on my side and you're just some woman of color. You should know your place before you get yourself in trouble." Paul's words were both an insult and a challenge, but Liz didn't flinch. She felt the tense silence envelop the supermarket, everyone's eyes on her. This was no longer a personal argument. It was a moment to prove that composure and principle always triumph over arrogance and prejudice. Liz stood tall, her shoulders squared, as if facing an enemy on the battlefield, not a man in a police uniform. Her eyes burned with resolve. Despite Paul's mocking and insulting words, the crowd grew quieter, holding their breath, waiting for her next move. She took a step forward, unafraid. Her voice, calm but sharp as a blade, cut through the tension. "You can think of me however you like," she said, "but remember, arrogance and contempt for others don't hide your own shortcomings. I'm not here to fight you for power, but I won't let you abuse yours." Paul frowned, his confidence beginning to waver at Liz's unwavering demeanor. He looked at her, searching for a sign of insecurity or fear, but all he saw was a woman as solid as a statue. The crowd was now fully engaged, some even recording the confrontation with their phones. "Don't act high and mighty with me," Paul snarled, trying to regain control. "You're nothing but a troublemaker. If I wanted, I could throw you out of here right now." Liz didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched slightly, an expression of frightening calm. "If you think your badge gives you the right to act like that," she said, "then I'll let the law decide that. You're wrong if you think I'm afraid of you." The atmosphere in the supermarket was electric, the tension palpable as the two stood face to face. Paul, large and aggressive, faced Liz, a woman of average height, not in uniform, but whose presence and eyes radiated undeniable authority. "You can continue to insult me," Liz said, her voice calm but firm, "but remember, I'm not alone here. There are plenty of witnesses, and if you think you can use your words to demean me, you're wrong. I'm not standing here to defend my personal honor. I'm standing here to defend the values I've spent my life upholding." The supermarket was silent. Though no one spoke, Liz knew from their eyes that the crowd was on her side. Paul, while still trying to project a tough exterior, couldn't hide his unease as he realized the situation was spiraling out of his control. Liz remained steadfast, a beacon of principle in the face of injustice and prejudice. As Paul began to lose his grip, Liz remained remarkably calm under the scrutiny and, at times, fear of the crowd. She understood that her every action and word at this moment not only affected her, but also served as a testament to justice and righteousness. Paul took a step forward, his voice harder and more aggressive. "I'm warning you," he said. "Don't make this worse. I'm the police, and I have the right to deal with you right here." His words rang out, but instead of intimidating Liz, They only strengthened her resolve. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled her phone from her pocket, not in a panic, but with a decisive air, as if she had planned it all along. "You have your rights," she said, her voice soft but sharp as steel, "and I have mine. Let's see whose side the law is on." She quickly dialed a number, her voice calm as she spoke into the phone. "Hello, I need backup at the central supermarket. There's a police officer here abusing his power and threatening people. I need officers on the scene immediately." Paul was stunned, his bluster deflating in an instant. The crowd, now realizing the tables had turned, began to murmur excitedly. Some stopped recording to call the authorities themselves. Liz, amidst the growing commotion, remained calm and collected. "What do you think you're doing?" Paul roared, taking another step towards her, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, unwavering. "I'm doing what you should be doing," she replied, her voice firm but even, "defending fairness and responsibility." Just then, the wail of a police siren pierced the air, signaling the arrival of backup. The crowd parted to make way for the officers. Liz, without breaking eye contact with Paul, slowly extended her hand, pointing directly at him. "This is the man you need to talk to," she said. "His actions have been documented and witnessed by everyone here." Paul, his arrogance now completely shattered, visibly paled. The bravado that had defined him moments before vanished, replaced by a mixture of confusion and anxiety. Liz, however, remained composed, as if she had anticipated every turn of events. She knew her intelligence and courage had helped her navigate this challenge, not only to protect herself, but also to demonstrate that justice must always be served. As the supermarket doors swung open, Mayor Andrew Preston walked in. The already tense atmosphere intensified. He exuded authority, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Liz. His steps were purposeful, like a man who had come to rectify a wrong. Paul, who had been disoriented before, was now completely shaken. The swagger that had marked his demeanor was gone, replaced by bewilderment and fear. He stammered, trying to explain himself. "Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything. It's just that she—" But Andrew cut him off sharply. "Shut up," he commanded, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "I'm here because of an urgent call from Colonel Elizabeth Anderson, a woman I hold in the highest regard. Your behavior has been reported and witnessed by numerous people. Don't think your flimsy excuses will erase what you've done." Liz stood still, her eyes fixed on Andrew. She felt a sense of relief knowing that justice was about to be served. But her expression remained serious, a reminder that the fight wasn't over. Andrew walked towards her, his expression softening. "Colonel Anderson," he said, "I hope you weren't injured or harmed in any way. This behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with thoroughly." Liz nodded, her voice calm yet resolute. "I'm fine, Mr. Mayor," she replied. "But this isn't just about me. It's about those in positions of power being held accountable for their actions. If I hadn't spoken up today, there would have been others who would have been treated unfairly." Andrew turned his gaze to Paul, his eyes now cold. "You have abused your authority, insulted a high-ranking military officer, and betrayed the public's trust in the police force. You don't deserve to wear that uniform." A female witness from the crowd stepped forward and handed Andrew her phone, which contained a video recording of the entire incident. Andrew watched it, his face hardening. "This behavior is intolerable," he declared. He then turned to the newly arrived police officers. "Strip him of his weapons and insignia immediately. An investigation will be launched, and he will be subject to the full extent of disciplinary action." Paul, now utterly defeated, was speechless as the officers carried out Andrew's orders. The crowd outside the supermarket erupted in applause, a tribute to Liz and the mayor's decisive action. Liz, though she sought no accolades, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. As Andrew turned back to her, his voice was filled with respect. "Colonel Anderson," he said, This city needs people like you to remind us all about responsibility and integrity. I apologize for what you've had to endure." Liz nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor," she replied. "I only hope that this incident will lead to real, lasting change." Andrew nodded, his face solemn but sympathetic. "We're going to make sure of that." Liz left the supermarket, stepping out into the sunlight. Her heart felt lighter, but she knew that the fight for fairness and accountability was never truly over, and she was ready to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for all those who couldn't stand up on their own. Paul Smith, stripped of his badge and weapon, was escorted away in stunned silence. His face, once so arrogant, now reflected only fear and confusion. As the police car pulled away, the crowd remained, their chatter and disapproving glances following him like a spectre. At the police station, Paul was immediately interrogated. The video evidence, coupled with the eyewitness accounts, proved insurmountable. The police chief, informed by Mayor Andrew Preston, declared that Paul's behaviour was a disgrace to the entire department. On the same day, he was officially suspended from duty and faced a full internal investigation. The story spread like wildfire, not just locally but nationally. Videos of Paul abusing his power and treating Elizabeth Anderson with such disrespect went viral, sparking widespread outrage. People Paul had mistreated in the past came forward with their own stories, further compounding his troubles. Paul, once so proud of his position, now faced a swift and inevitable downfall. Acquaintances distanced themselves, and former colleagues expressed their disappointment. In his small, solitary house, Paul sat, head bowed, finally understanding the weight of his actions. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Anderson continued her life with humility and resolve. She didn't seek attention, yet she received countless expressions of gratitude and admiration from the community. Her actions not only held Paul accountable, but also ignited a much-needed conversation about responsibility and ethics in law enforcement. Ultimately, Paul Smith lost his job and faced legal charges, including abuse of power and threatening behavior. In subsequent trials, he appeared contrite, the arrogance that once defined him completely absent. This was the price he paid for forgetting that power comes with responsibility, and that injustice has no place in a just society. After this pivotal event, Elizabeth's life was forever changed. The story of her courage spread, becoming a symbol for those who dared to stand up against injustice. The press, media, and activists alike hailed her as a modern-day hero. But for Elizabeth, she didn't see herself as a hero. She simply saw it as her duty, the responsibility of a soldier and a citizen, to protect the principles of equality. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the incident became clear. Local police forces faced increased scrutiny, and changes were implemented in their selection and training processes. Seminars on responsibility and ethics in law enforcement were held, with Elizabeth invited as a keynote speaker. Standing before hundreds of people, she shared her story not for applause, but to remind them that power is only meaningful when used to protect, not to oppress. Paul Smith's career was over. The public trial not only cost him his freedom, but also his honor. The community turned its back on him, and even those who had once supported him couldn't forgive his abuse of power. In the darkness of his isolation, Paul began to grasp the bitter truth. Pride and injustice not only destroy others, but also lead to self-destruction. Elizabeth, however, didn't stop at sharing her personal story. She became an inspiration for numerous movements fighting for justice and equality. Articles and videos documenting her actions were shared widely, encouraging others not to be afraid to confront injustice. Yet Elizabeth remained grounded and consistent in her demeanor. She continued her service in the military, a living example that true strength lies not in power, but in integrity and the courage to do what's right. Every time she reflected on the incident, she felt not regret, but a quiet pride, knowing that her actions had contributed to making a small part of society better. For her, this story wasn't an ending, but a reminder that the fight for justice requires constant vigilance and courage, and she was ready to face any challenge in her journey to defend the values she believed in. Elizabeth Anderson's legacy is documented not only in newspapers and videos that captured the moment she stood firm amidst criticism and threats, but also in the profound changes in how society views justice and responsibility. Her unwavering commitment to fighting injustice created a wave of inspiration, not just in the military, but also in the wider community, especially for women and people of color who often face discrimination and marginalization. Every time they heard Elizabeth's story, people remembered not only her bravery in the supermarket, but also a resilient woman who was willing to stand up against all injustice, no matter the cost. The workshops she participated in inspired countless individuals, particularly those in law enforcement, to uphold dignity and respect human rights in all circumstances. The changes in police recruitment and training that Elizabeth helped initiate began to yield results, as more and more officers became aware of their responsibilities and professional ethics. But Elizabeth's legacy extends beyond reforms and public recognition. It's in her daily life that she created a role model for the younger generation, who looked to her and learned how to face challenges with calmness, patience, and unwavering determination. Elizabeth didn't seek fame, but the respect she earned from everyone, from her colleagues to the community, was a clear demonstration of the power of integrity. Despite facing difficulties and challenges throughout her career, Elizabeth always stood her ground. She became a symbol of courage and resilience, reminding everyone that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person can make a difference. Elizabeth understands that true legacy isn't measured by fame or awards, but by the values one leaves in the hearts of others. For Elizabeth, her legacy is the change she has inspired, the solid foundation upon which the next generation will build. A generation that stands up for justice and refuses to tolerate injustice. And so no matter how many years pass, Elizabeth Anderson's legacy will endure, not just in seminars and speeches, but in the hearts of those who continue the fight for a more just and equitable society. After the incident with Paul Smith, Elizabeth Anderson didn't simply consider the matter closed. She embraced a larger mission. She realized that injustice wasn't an isolated incident, but a systemic problem that needed to be addressed at its roots. Every day, every story she heard from those oppressed and abused fueled her sense of responsibility. She understood that relying solely on exceptional individuals wasn't enough. A broad, collective movement was necessary, where everyone could speak up and fight for their rights. Elizabeth began engaging in call-to-action campaigns, urging people, especially law enforcement, to re-evaluate their roles and responsibilities in upholding justice. She organized meetings, workshops, and media campaigns to encourage individuals to stand up to injustice instead of remaining silent. Each of us has the right to say no to abuse of power, and each of us can make a difference, was a slogan she frequently used in her speeches. Elizabeth's outreach extended beyond the military community to individuals in the civilian world who felt marginalized or voiceless. She encouraged them not to fear those in power, because justice is a fundamental right that cannot be denied. Elizabeth's demeanor shifted from cautious to determined. She understood that every action, every call to action, created a ripple effect, and that was the way to achieve long-term, sustainable change. Elizabeth wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for those who couldn't speak for themselves, for the fairer society she envisioned. The call to action was not easy, but Elizabeth was prepared for the challenge. She understood that it was a long journey, and not everyone would join her, but she believed in the power of solidarity, in the ability of each individual to make a difference if they refused to give up. With every step, Elizabeth transformed her personal struggle into a powerful movement, a constant reminder that justice must be defended, not just for one person, but for the entire community. Her legacy is not just a story, it's an ongoing movement, inspiring countless others to stand up for what's right. Thank you for watching and supporting Story Karam. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support of Story Karam. We appreciate you watching Story Karam. Thank you.